Hey friends, it's me, the Ebony Otaku, the well-rounded nerd, also the most inconsistent YouTuber on the platform because Homegirl has a whole life and it's been real busy. It's always busy, so I record when I can. But in the absence of me posting lots of videos, thank you all who have continued to watch and subscribe and comment. I thoroughly appreciate it because over here on this little corner of the internet, every view counts. So, as you can see, I am in my new office setup. I still got a couple of things left to do in here, but overall, I'm pretty happy with it. You know, got the big guys displayed. I've got a few new figures. Obviously, you can't see what's over there, but I have lots of angles to choose from in this office. So, over time, I will make use of all the angles and all of the backgrounds because it's nice. I like having tons of stuff around to look at. That makes the office environment fun. You should see it when I'm like doing work. Like people are like in video meetings, conferences. They're like, "What's that? What's that? What's that?" And I'm like, "Your office could look like this too if you were willing to express your inner nerd. Let your inner nerd fly free. It is appropriate in all situations." So today is Independence Day here in the America. It is July 4th, 2023, and is the day that we celebrate liberation from the British. I wonder how the British view this holiday. I saw something in my news feed, a British man's reaction to American Independence Day. I might go back and watch it because I've always wondered, like, what do they think? When we celebrate, yay, America Day, are they like, is it like, the traitors are still free day? Like, how's it seem? But anywho, since I'm doing a recording on Independence Day, I was trying to think what might be the best topic today. Because we know Warhammer ain't nobody free. And the Warhammer universe, all is for the Emperor in the Warhammer universe. And then, other book series that I've dived into, freedom's not really a thing. I mean, truth be told, historically, the concept, our modern concept of what we consider free, is rather unique when you look at countries like the United States of America, Canada, Australia, Great Britain, even countries like maybe Mexico, the Philippines, Japan, countries that give their citizens the freedom to become what they want, to have the ability to escape previous caste systems that existed, social systems where you can literally work hard enough, earn enough, do enough, and enter a different level in society. That is a very recent phenomenon in human history. I mean, if you didn't know, for most of human history, what you were going to be in the world was decided before you were born, before your parents were born, before your grandparents were born. If historically a family had been in the servant class, their name would reflect what they were. Now, I do speak several languages, but we're going to keep it to English right now. I do know this exists in other countries, but just stay with me in my native tongue. So when you think about names like Baker, the reason the name, last name, surname Baker exists is because that would have historically been a family that baked. Or the name Cooper, they would have been people who made barrels. So names literally were a direct translation of what a person or their family did. Son of so and so would have been in a long line of bakers or butlers or candlestick makers. This concept that people have the right to choose is very modern. And when I say modern, I mean in the last 200 years. And we have to think about the many, many, many thousands of years of evolved human history. We've lived under monarchies, theocracies, dictatorships, hostile takeovers by foreign nations. which was very common for a long time. War was just, how it was, not just in the future, but, in our past as well. Think about what Genghis Khan and the Mongols accomplished. Mongolia is a landlocked country with like not the best farmland, and yet someone was raised up out of that country who took over a good 80% of the known world, of what their known world was at the time, stretching from, the western coast of Japan all the way over into Eurasia, up into Russia, down past China, like huge accomplishment. But within that system, you were still going to be whatever society decided you were going to be. So I think y'all know where we're going with this. Let's explore the very opposite of what freedom looks like when you don't have a choice, when the world is going to tell you what you're going to be, and somehow you still have to try to make a life for yourself and your children out of that. Descended from the Mongol Empire, eventually came the Chinese dynasties, the oldest that we know of long-lasting lines of emperors and empresses. We know that in Africa, we have the oldest nations on earth, but a continual line of leadership out of the same, inbred set of families. Don't come for me. I said what I said. That we know of, that we have, very good written record of, are descended out of that line, from the bloodline of the Emperor Yongle, who really worked to unite the disparate nations and warring clans that eventually became China. And China became a country of caste system and rules. There are countries today where the caste system still exists. India is a good example. Not always, but typically in India, if you are born poor, you're going to die poor. It's just how it is. If you're born wealthy, you're going to die wealthy unless somebody in your family does something real dumb. The only way to get out of the system is to be brilliant, to offer something that no one else can offer, or to be beautiful. So you can marry up because you're going to produce pretty babies. That's how the caste system works. And that is for the perceived sake of society having all functions filled. In a free society, you have to hope all functions are going to be filled because we're allowed to pursue our dreams. We're allowed to become whatever we want. The society that I was born into, I've been told since I was a child, reach for the stars. What are your dreams? You can become anything you want to be. That is a recent luxury. Usually throughout history, people have been told what they're going to be, what their place in society has already been decided for them. Their marriages being decided while they're still in the womb, not even taking a breath of communal air yet, and possibly their spouse and future family already being chosen. So on this Independence Day, I am very thankful for when and where I was born. It could have been a lot different. I mean, obviously you can tell as a Black American, I'm the descendant of slaves. I knew my great-grandfather. He died when I was very young. I was like 6'5" when he died. Lovely man. Learned a lot from him in the few years that I knew him because he told lots of stories, but he was the son of a slave. He grew up in a world where there was no choice. Obviously, he never got to see me grow up, so he has no idea of the life that I have, that I didn't suffer what he suffered. But my grandparents on my dad's side were able to see that. And before my grandfather passed away a couple of years ago, I've been told that he was very proud to find out what I do for a living because they weren't dreams he had either. He was born into a system that decided for him what he was going to be. He had to live through the civil rights movement, but never fully reap the benefits of the civil rights system. I think it's important to understand history and where we come from to really value what we have right now, because it's so easy to overly criticize. Hey, look, I've got political opinions. They don't matter for this channel. We all have opinions. We all have experiences, and they are valid. For those of us who have been blessed to be born into westernized countries that allow us the freedom to choose the life we want, to choose our spouses, to choose if we will succeed or fail, to have options if we fail, that if I don't do my best, if I don't achieve my best, there's still a safety net. Society is still going to reach out and try to pull me up. It's hard for us to fathom life being another way, and thus at some point we lose our empathy for people who still live that way today. I think the best example of that recently is Ruyi's royal love in the palace. So today is going to be a little bit of a video essay because I want to start diving deeper, just like I am in reading different parts of Warhammer. I want to go deeper into Ruyi's royal love and even go episode by episode, character by character. I don't know exactly how I'm going to do it yet, but let's talk more about this. And I think Independence Day is a great day to kick it off. So friends, in celebration of our freedom, let's look at the exact opposite of what it really means to have no freedom and yet still somehow be expected to make a life for yourself. Let's explore this thing called the Imperial Harem. So, just inwardly, I am a person who stands on ceremony. You know, I like all the things, pomp and or circumstance. I'm into it. Once the nations that Yungla conquered, once the Mongol nations evolved and they form the one country we know today as China, our land, it is introduced the ways of being, of showing up in society. And there is a lot of ceremony that goes with all of that. Ceremony and tradition are the glue that hold society together, because in a society that has a caste system that tells people what they should be and how they should behave from the moment that they're born, the only way to keep everybody in their position is to have a ceremony for everything. And in Imperial China, ancient China, we must understand that the ceremony is more than just pomp and circumstance. It is a reminder to all in attendance, to all who are in the family, around the family, serving the family, what their place is and how they should show up as a member of that family. Now, as we dive deeper, remember that we evaluate works within the context in which they're written. Ruyi's Royal Love in the Palace is a fictionalized account of a particular individual who was forced to navigate the Imperial Harem and all of the pomp, circumstance, and ceremony that comes with that. And we see through Ruyi's eyes what it really meant to have to be a part of that world, because the imperial family of China was supposed to be an example to all Chinese citizens of what a family should look like. So as we explore that ceremony, let's first look at the family. At the top of the family is the Son of Heaven, the Emperor. And every man was to be an emperor in his own household. If a man did well, if a man earned enough, if a man could prove himself capable, then he could earn himself his own Empress, a woman chosen for him who would bear him sons and maintain the household so that the man could go out and do man stuff and work. The woman would stay home and maintain the things going on at home, command the servants, make sure the money was spent well, use her hands to weave and sew garments for the family, prepare the meals or oversee the preparing of the meals, and if the man was of status enough, have control over other wives and concubines. When the emperor is married at any point in history, there is ceremony that goes with that. When you look at the Imperial Palace, if you ever have the chance to go to Beijing and see the Forbidden City, which I really want to do, but post-COVID China is not a place that I want to go right now. But I do hope to see the Forbidden City in person one day. If you ever are able to go see it, you'll notice that as you progress further and further from the front gate to the first courtyards to the inner courtyards, as you keep going through the palace, you'll see 3 gates. one big gate in the center and two on the sides. The emperor and his primary first wife, his legitimate wife, the Empress, when he is married, have the honor of going through the center gate. That signifies to everyone around that regardless of what happens, that this is our dragon and phoenix pair that are together. We are wishing them thousands of years of long life. May they produce the next heir to our great kingdom, if they don't, get to become immortal. The other wives and concubines during a marriage ceremony or any ceremony would never be given the honor of walking through the center gate. That is reserved for the dragon and the phoenix. They are extra branches on the family tree. They walk through the sides. And even which side they walk through denotes who they are in the family. So the emperor to the world presents his chosen bride, whether he chose her or she was chosen for him. And then these are the other women who will help me produce an heir. Here's why understanding this is so important. Every woman or girl who could be in the Imperial Harem, that life was chosen for them. There was not a concept of freedom. Even the woman who would be Empress, she is a beautiful bird in a gilded cage. They are victims of a system that has decided what they're going to be. And if they don't live up to what that system expects of them, tragedy awaits them on the other side. Whether walking through the center gate or the side gates, once they enter into marriage with the emperor, these women are trapped. And inside of the imperial palace, they have to figure out how to make a life for themselves. So let's bring this back to where we are introduced to our heroine in Ruyi's Royal Love in the Palace. Ruyi actually grows up as a childhood friend of the soon-to-be emperor in this stage of Chinese history. They're buddies, they're pals. And along the way, he falls in love with her. She probably falls in love with him too, but she has learned through watching and growing up around the royal family that she needs to keep her feelings to herself. Silent is your friend in the imperial palace. Ruyi has an aunt who is a dowager empress, and that portion of her family makes some mistakes, and her ability to be chosen as empress is actually cast aside. Because she grew up being friends with the crown prince, it was hopeful in her family that she would be the next empress. But once, family members messed up and, off with their heads and all that, that wasn't going to be possible. She wasn't going to be eligible to be his bride, and that changes their entire relationship. Regardless of if it's this emperor or another prince, whatever, they are going to be presented with a choice in brides at some point. And these are women who are chosen from particular families, whether they are families who want to curry favor with the current imperial family in power, so they offer up a pretty daughter with talent. Perhaps, it is to strengthen family relationships, bridge merchant relationships, whatever it is. These girls are being offered as tribute, make no mistake about it. They do have to be physically beautiful. You can't be an emperor's concubine, extra wife, whatever, unless you're pretty. But beauty actually is not the most important trait. They have to be pure, virgins. He doesn't, but they do. They also, there's a teenager in the house, so if you hear background noise, there's crap I can do about it. They also have to be women of learning and talent. This is really interesting because for a good portion of Chinese history, there was a tradition of binding feet. We've talked about that with Snowflower and The Secret Fan and other books, where women passed down the tradition of literally binding a girl's foot, which would bind her spirit to the traditions of the Chinese family. As your feet are bound, so are your options, so is your mind, so is your heart. You become physically dependent on your husband and your husband's family to take care of you, which makes you an obligated servant of that family. That's a whole thing on its own. But even when foot binding was at its height, typically, not always, but typically, women who were offered to the royal court had unbound feet. So these girls who could potentially become wives, concubines, mistresses of the emperor, they were able to escape in some degree one of the most tragic things that came out of a system of telling people what they were going to be. They might have been able to escape the fate of broken, deformed feet for the rest of their life. However, in replacement of feet that bind you, your family binds you. If you are chosen to be a part of the Imperial Harem, you're not just there for yourself. You're there for your family. You're there because you have an uncle who's a general. You're there because you have a father who wants to be a doctor. You're there because you have a brother who's trying to become an imperial scholar. You're there because you have a cousin who's an advisor to the emperor. Nothing about your place in that world has anything to do with you as a woman. You are obligated, expected to fulfill your place and to maneuver your way into favor with the emperor and hopefully produce a son. So out of the frying pan into the fire, you have to imagine what the upbringing of these young ladies would be like. Can you imagine from a young age being told that you could potentially marry the son of heaven one day? You know, these are children that when they were children, their childhoods were probably cut short. Their ability to run and play and have fun, these kids didn't get that kind of childhood. They didn't get the freedom of, using modern language, of drinking out of the hose. They didn't get the freedom of running down the street to find their friends and go bike riding. They didn't get the freedom of going out with their girlfriends on a Friday night and hanging out at the movies. That's not stuff they did. They were treated as little adults from when they could toddle, to learn the rules, to learn to speak correctly, to learn to read, to be given lessons in history and poetry and art, to learn to play instruments and sew beautifully and sing and everything else so that they would be the most appealing type of woman to fill the imperial harem. The reason the emperor is offered so many choices in brides is it is never assumed that the first wife, the Empress, will produce the right type of person to inherit the throne. It is expected that she will have babies and produce a son, but in the imperial lineage, there is no guarantee that first wife, first son is going to be the crown prince. In European tradition, typically what happens is when king and queen produce a baby, that baby's the heir, period. Even if they ran off and had babies with other people, those are considered illegitimate children. And I find that to be a really interesting juxtaposition between European monarchy and Asian monarchy. At least the emperor, acknowledged all of his women. And at least they all got at least a small palace and a couple of servants and, food and whatnot. The European monarchy, like, everybody was cheating on everybody, always has been. And if they produced a kid, it's like, oh, God, what kid? Shove them away. Lock them in the Bastille until they wither away. But at least, in Asian monarchy and even African monarchy, like, the side pieces were just wives. Extra wives and concubines. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just like, at least they got acknowledged. That's where I'm going to leave that. So, when the crown prince, the emperor, is presented his opportunity to choose wives, these are the kind of women he's choosing from. They are the most talented, most beautiful, most learned, exceptional women in the country. But the emperor is still a man. Our emperor in this story, anyway, he loved him some Ruyi, and he wants her to be his empress. But even he is not completely free to choose because he's a young emperor. The older women and men in the palace still have quite a bit of control over him. And when the ceremony of presenting women to him happens, he chooses another woman as his bride. And Ruyi is given the rank of one of the noble ladies, which that kind of sucks. There are ranks within the Imperial Harem, like the military, because women aren't going to go serve in the military back then, but the Imperial Harem is its own special kind of boot camp. And there's everything from simply being a low level concubine all the way up to the most noble consort, which is just a step below being empress. And when a woman produces a son, she could potentially be promoted to a position of being a co-empress, especially if she pops out a boy before the actual empress does. Imagine all of the infighting and all of just unfettered hatred, unnatural hatred for one another these women would have, because they are just pawns in a political system. They're there for their family's advancement, and they better make a boy. And we know through modern science that it is actually, the male half of reproduction that determines the gender of the child. But in most societies across the globe, it has always been perceived that it is up to the woman to choose. Like, if they know they have to produce boys and we could choose, don't you think we'd just choose boys? But I never understood that thinking, because if there's always got to be sons born, who do you think is going to have the son if there's no girls? Off my soapbox. So Ruyi is pulled into this world. She's this close to escaping. She can't be empress. She could be off the hook. She's not off the hook because he still wants her to be his woman. And that's one of the real tragedies of becoming part of the Imperial Harem. These women lose the ability to choose for the rest of their life. Yes, they're given palaces. They're given beautiful clothing. They are given servants and an allowance and the best food, and they are entertained. All of their physical needs are met. And if they please the emperor, they get an upgrade in everything every once in a while. As they are promoted through the harem, you can be promoted as you have babies and whatnot. They are given more as a reward for their service to the emperor. But what they can never have is freedom of heart and mind. The emperor has an obligation to produce as many babies as possible, which is why he has as many women as possible and from as many good families as possible, because one of those combinations is going to produce the heir to the throne. And the heir apparent can be chosen by the emperor whenever he so fits. And he can change the heir apparent as well. The wife and son who have favor one day may be completely different on another day. And Ruyi gets trapped into this world. Because if she could have escaped being a concubine, a consort, a lady to the emperor, she may have had a chance to just marry into a regular family. But remember, in Imperial China, ancient China, the family that is the royal family is the example to all of China of what a family should be. Bring it full circle. So if a man does well enough, works hard enough, proves himself to the gods enough, he too might have his own empress, a second wife, a third wife, a concubine or two. And he too will be charged with producing as many sons as possible, because if you are a good noble man of hardy stock, well, then you should just make as much of yourself as possible. And as you get older, the women successively get younger. Again, we have to evaluate works within the time that they are written or the time that they're about. It's not a judgment call on if this way of life was right or wrong. It went on for thousands of years. and produced one of the most lasting dynasties the earth has ever seen. At the same time, there are a lot of men and women who never got to taste the freedom of choosing what they would do with their life. I can't imagine being Ruyi and being at the edge of escaping that gilded cage only to be pulled back in. Because, truth be told, yes, the Emperor does get a little stable full of women to choose from, but even that's thrust upon him. There have been evidences of emperors throughout time that favored wife or concubine, had he been a regular person, he would have just been married, had a little family, and been happy. But that's not the position that man was given. If you're born to be the son of heaven, there are rights and responsibilities that are thrust upon you. Like, even the women on the night that he sleeps with them, that's not even chosen by him. He has astrologers, doctors, physicians, and everyone else to basically bring a girl when she's ovulating for the best chance of producing a baby. And the women in the harem get real wicked with each other over this. And we're going to explore that even more. Some of the stuff these women do to each other is just, it's almost unspeakable. Like, the woman who's chosen to be Empress, she knows that Ruyi is the real favorite of everybody knows she's the favorite. And she gifts bracelets to the other 3 closest wives to the emperor on the day of everyone's marriage. She's going through the center gate, they're going through the sides. But she gives them gifts of bracelets. Those bracelets have a particular type of basil seed in them that cause infertility. And because it's a gift given by the legitimate wife, they're obligated to wear it every day, and she knows that. And for the first 4 or 5 years of being married, these women never get pregnant. You got to remember, they're like 16 to 20 years old, so they're like in prime reproductive years, and they're not getting pregnant. Yet they're living the life of noble concubines to the emperor. And no one suspects that something foul might be happening. They're just looked down upon as infertile women. It's, can I use this word? It's insane. But that's what it's like to be in a world that chooses what you're going to be for you. Because truth be told, even if Ruyi had escaped being in the Imperial Harem, she would have been one of the wives of another noble man who would have had the ability to have multiple wives. She would have still been expected to produce a male in that household. She would have still been expected to be a woman of learning and art and beauty and everything else. There would have been no options for her to find true love, as it were. There would have been no options for a career. It's interesting, especially, I love a good historical novel. But reading about women who chose things like entering Buddhist nunneries or even going into prostitution, working in bathhouses and that type of thing, because then at least they had some type of control over their own future to choose celibacy for the rest of their life and cut off men altogether, or to put themselves in a position to have power over men to an extent, or be a wife to someone you didn't choose. Those were the options. Those aren't options. When I think about, all of the study I've done on the Imperial Harem, I just find it to be a fascinating topic. And I know that there are still harems that exist today. A lot of the rulers of Middle Eastern countries still keep harems. I don't know as much about the African nations, but I would assume that if they follow in, true Islamic tradition or anything like that, Islam does allow a man to have, up to 4 wives. That it's still a thing. And we all know about, the FLDS here in America. So these types of situations still exist. I think the big difference between them, I know that Islam is this way, is if a man is going to have multiple wives, he has to be able to treat them all equally. That's a tenet of Islam. If you're gonna have four wives, each one of them gets a house the same size. They all get the same amount of clothes. You get one a BMW, you gotta get the other one a BMW. That's how this works. You gotta split your time up evenly, which is why most men never go for multiple wives, because if one wife gets a $300,000 house, you got to have four $300,000 houses. It adds up real quick. If one wife gets pregnant, you got to get the other one's pregnant. So, you everything just compounds on itself. Where the Chinese dynasties were able to, I guess, get a hold of this and make it a successful system was the wealth of the nation. You have to remember how big China is. I think a lot of us, because we've never been, I live in America, which is a big country, tip to tail, it's huge. China bigger. Here's how big China is, y'all. China is so big and has so many people that 1 out of 4 people on the planet is Chinese. Not Asian, Chinese specifically. That's how big it is. And because there was a history of prolific procreation, that's part of the reason they were able to have so many people and produce the wealth of China as well. And that wealth enabled sustaining the imperial families the way that they were. India is about to overtake China for the most populous because, one child policy, they about to have a whole dip in their population, but India is, rising up to take over. So it's going to get to a point where 1 in 4 people on the planet is Indian. Not Asian, specifically of Indian descent. That's a lot of folks, y'all. Because about 1/4 of the planet is of African descent, but Africa's not a country. Africa's a continent. There's many countries in Africa. We're talking about one nation of people. That's how big China is. The vast amount of natural resources a country like that has is what enabled these dynasties to exist for hundreds, thousands of years. And that brings us to modern times. There is no erasing thousands of years of human history. We did what we did, we are what we are, cannot undo it. But I do think we can learn from it and learn to be grateful for what we have. Was it right or wrong to institute those systems? I can't say. I wasn't there. I can speak on modern times and how we handle things now, but that's not why we're here. But what it does do, especially when I read stories of women in history, of the struggles that they had, of what they had to endure to have the lives that they have, it makes me incredibly grateful that I was given the ability to have a choice. So many people never got a choice. Not men, not women, not children, nobody. Where you were born is what you were going to be. And you didn't have the option to become something different. So on this Independence Day, I just want to be thankful that I was born in the United States of America at a modern time. Be thankful that you were born in Canada. Be thankful that you were born in Australia, in Mexico, wherever. Be thankful if you were born in a place where you have options, where you get to choose what you're going to be, rather than the world telling you what you're going to be. But we will explore more of Ruyi's Royal Love in the Palace. Again, I don't know if I'm going to do character by character or if I'm going to go episode by episode, but we'll see, because I have lots of time and I finally got my office together. Y'all, this was some work. I'm still in the process of unpacking in other parts of the house. Moving is the worst. I don't ever want to move again. Never, ever, 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 ever again. But I hope you have a happy 4th. If you are in America and celebrate, or an American abroad and you celebrate. But tell me your thoughts on other properties and works I should explore. There's so much. but there's so little time. I just get to things when I get to them. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.